And we have a special guest in studio, somebody you're very, very familiar with.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody who's been here before and somebody who always seems to have big news. And Baruch Hashem, somebody whose big news always includes Eretz Yisrael. Not everybody in the wine business has their eyes and their sights on the Holy Land. But this gentleman, Jeff Morgan, who we know from the Covenant Winery, originally from California, he has had his sights and his mind on the Holy Land for quite a while. Jeff Morgan, welcome back to JM and the AM.
Thank you, Nachum. It's great to be here.
Appreciate that. Welcome, and I hope that things are going well in this pre-holiday season.
Let me just clear my throat.
Certainly. Have a little rosé and clear that throat. Come on.
Good. You know, by the way, I'm not originally from California.
Whoops, sorry.
I'm originally from New York.
There we go.
I grew up on the Upper West Side.
Ah, you know this town.
And I do. In fact, I know it well enough to have taken the subway down here. And then, you know, I keep telling myself it's a short walk from the subway, but it's not.
It's not.
It's my exercise.
Thank God it was decent weather, at least
yes.
that.
Well, and, you know, I took the long road to Israel. I went the wrong way first.
Right.
I went to California.
West.
Yeah, I went west. I thought it was east. And 25 years later, I'm now spending quite a bit of time in Israel.
Hey, can I start somewhere else before we get to the whole Israel angle? We know what people like you think of California vineyards. There are people in this country who think the only real vineyards in this country are in California. Like if you want to be a vintner, if you want to be in the wine business, it all starts with California. There are those who think that way. What do you think when you hear of all these ancillary areas of the United States that are now claiming wineries? Northwest, New York State, other states. What do you think when you, a California wine guy, hears about all these other places that are now making wine in this country?
That's a loaded question, right? So, I mean, I guess I'm going to have to share this with our listeners, but I actually started making wine in New York.
Wow.
So that's where I got my start on Long Island. So I did go east, but only 100 miles east.
The vineyard was on Long Island?
Yeah.
What
yeah.
city?
In Cutchogue, actually. Cutchogue, not Patchogue. Those of you who know Long Island think Patchogue is the east end of it, but it's not. It's smack dab in the middle. The east end is really, you know, Cutchogue, the Orient Point. Yeah, the North Fork is the capital of New York winemaking. And I landed there in, it must have been 1988. Looking for a job, and I knocked on doors. I was a saxophone player before that, so I didn't know anything about wine except that I liked to drink it. And somebody, was foolish enough to hire me, and they didn't even have a winery yet. So I worked in the vineyards there for a couple of years, and we grew grapes, and then we built a winery, one of the early wineries in Long Island called Gristina. Now it's called Macari, and that's where I got my start.
When did you get to California?
So what happened is I started writing about wine for a local newspaper and then for the New York Times and then ultimately for a magazine called The Wine Spectator. And The Spectator sent me to California as a West Coast editor in 95. It was 1995.
To be permanently on the West Coast.
To be permanent. I started writing for them in 92. And then they moved me and my family there in 95.
So you're writing about wine in 95. When do you start making wine on the West Coast?
Here's Jay Buxbaum.
Oh, boy. Oh, boy.
Yep.
Holy cow.
Jay, give me a hug.
I don't believe this. We're on. Did they realize we're on the air, Simon? Did they realize there's a show going on here?
Yeah.
And it's radio.
So what time? When do you get to be a winemaker?
Well, this is the part just about where we get to the part where I met Jay Buxbaum, actually. So he said, "How do we feel about other places besides California and America for making wine?" And I said, "That's a loaded question because I started in New York,
right.
And when I finally got my first big break as a wine writer." I didn't start making wine, and answer your question, in California till 2000. I started in New York in 88, was making wine there for a couple of years. Then I became this wine writer. My first assignment was kosher wine for Passover for the Wine Spectator. I didn't know anything about kosher wine at the time, and I called Jay Buxbaum at Royal Wines. And
he lived up to his reputation as vice president of wine education.
Wine education, wine, everything I needed to know
he had
for
to
that first
educate
article.
You.
Yeah, he did, and apparently he did it well because the Spectator hired me to do other articles.
And at some point, 5 years later, you have this, what would we call it, an itch to make your own wine?
Well, I missed making wine because I'd started as a winemaker
Right.
in the cellar in 88 in New York. And so I was out there writing, and I thought, I just want to make wine again. So I left the Spectator in 2000. I moved up to Napa, and I started working to make money. I worked for Dean and DeLuca, the food
We've
chain,
heard of them, sure.
They had a branch up there in Napa, and I started my own little winery called Solo Rosa, which was only rosé, not kosher. And then it was 2 years later that I met Eli Ben Zaken from Castel Winery in Israel. He was visiting Napa. We tasted his wine, and we said, wow, this stuff's really good. Let's try to make a kosher Napa Valley Cabernet. That was the beginning of Covenant.
And that's the start of Covenant Wine, which has become such a common name now on kosher tables around the world. For every light on Broadway, for every guy like you who decides to make their own label, who decides to make their own winery, how many are trying that and they simply never become successful?
Well, it kind of depends on your definition of success. I think if you can stay in the business and, as long as I have, which is now 16 years with Covenant and almost 20 years as a winemaker, both in California and Israel, and I'm still standing, still paying my bills, I would call that a success. And we make really good wine, I think, that's appreciated by people all over the world.
But are there plenty who don't get past the first year? Are there plenty who try to do their own label or their own wine or their own vineyard or become their own vintner and it just doesn't work out?
Well, yeah. I mean, basically, it's the wine business is not like other businesses in that you can't just start the business and make money. You have to wait for the wines to age in barrels, usually, or in bottles or whatever. So you got a year or two where you're putting out money and you're not getting much back. So that's a challenge.
You got to be really patient in your business, it seems.
Patient,
really
and you have to have a day job.
Right.
Yeah, which I used to have. So.
Jeff Morgan's here. We're joined by the Vice President of Wine Education at Royal Wine, the one, the only Jay
Buchsbaum. And we're on the greatest Jewish radio station on planet Earth.
That's correct.
Yeah.
And later I will share with you what I shared with Simon in terms of our growth, which is astounding, thank God. Mr. Buchsbaum, you were just part of the story that Mr. Morgan told.
Yes.
You apparently had a role in all of this.
Yes.
In getting Covenant to the point where it is today. It's nice to greet you. When we heard you were coming, we had a little wager about whether you'd really show up. I won't tell you which side Simon chose and which side I chose, but
Okay.
we did have some fun with that.
Okay.
And you made it. Here
I
you
did.
are.
I
And
did.
it's pre-Rosh Hashanah, the perfect time for you, just 2.5 weeks away from the holiday, actually a little more, to start recommending some delicious wines. And look who's sitting to your right. Somebody
look
who's
at this.
responsible for some delicious wines out
Absolutely.
there. Imagine that. Pretty incredible. I would show you this bottle, but I want to make sure it stays in my possession. This was a special bottle presented to me by Mr. Morgan, which we're going to discuss in just a couple of minutes here at the JM in the AM. Oh, look at that. You got one of your own. What do you think, Jay?
Amazing.
Got one of your own from Covenant Israel.
Blue Sea Rosé.
Pretty cool, huh?
It's like Lucy. No, Blue Sea Rosé.
Have you had it before?
I have.
You enjoy it?
No, I haven't had this one yet. Have
You
I?
had it maybe in Israel, but not
In
here.
Israel,
There is
yeah.
none here in America.
Hey,
Wow.
Yeah.
am I on? Yeah,
Simon, you're on, of course.
you had it in my house.
Oh, that's where I had it. Okay.
Glad we got that straight.
The answer to every question here is
Oh,
did I have it? Yes, we had it with Simon. That's always the answer. At some point, Simon served it to us. All right, Jeff, let's start with the California wines. What should people be aware of with the upcoming holidays? What are some of the choices that are out there that are big sellers in the kosher retail market that have the name Covenant on it?
Well, of course, our flagship wine, Covenant Napa Valley Cabernet, is out there. It's the first wine we ever made, and it still remains our flagship. I think it's among our best wines. You can get it at retail shops all over the New York, New Jersey area. Then, of course, we have the Red Sea brands, which is Red Sea Red, which is a blend of various grapes, red grapes, including Syrah and Cabernet. And we have our Red Sea Sauvignon Blanc, which is also quite widely available. And then we have our Red Sea Rosé, which is the American Covenant Rosé. Our newest brands that are carried by Royal Wines are the Tribe. Are you guys members?
As
Yeah,
far
I
as
thought
we
so.
know.
I thought so. So this is a wine for you. We have the Tribe Chardonnay, and we have the Tribe Proprietary Red. Both these wines are not only available in retail shops, but You can get them in restaurants, kosher restaurants all over the metropolitan area.
Finally.
Yeah. And then the newest addition to our hopefully not yet oversaturated Covenant portfolio is Covenant Mensch. Are you guys Mensches? Yes.
M-E-N-C-H?
Yes, M-E-N-C-H. This wine is also for you. And we have a Mensch White made from Roussanne, which is a phenomenally delicious grape grown in the south of France and also in California. And the Mensch Red is a Zin Petit Syrah blend. And both of these wines are also available in stores and kosher restaurants.
Before I turn to Jay for a comment about the list you just gave us, how does one decide if these wines have to be their own label, their own brand, so to speak, as opposed to just making them part of the Covenant line?
Well, they all say Covenant on the label, so they all are part of the Covenant
The tribe
portfolio.
is obvious. It's obvious to the consumer that it's a Covenant wine.
It says the tribe by Covenant.
Right.
Mensch has Covenant Mensch. I'm hoping that eventually restaurateurs will start labeling them on their wine list as Covenant Mensch, Covenant Tribe. That would help people know that it's a part of the family, but they're very different wines, different terroir, different appellations, that is, regions, and kind of different wine styles.
Mr. Buxbaum, you're the Vice President of Wine Education, and this audience knows how much you mean to us when it comes to wine expertise. What do you have to say about the list that Mr. Morgan just gave us?
Napa Valley Cabernet is Rosh Hashanah, brand new year. You really want to get the best of the best that you can, and I think that's what I would start off with. And if during the lunches, and especially during Sukkot or Sukkot or whoever you're playing to today, and I think you're playing to everybody, you definitely go with a rosé because it's a beautiful time of year to sit outside and to enjoy lighter fare, perhaps, with a really beautiful rosé. And also the idea that you're going to enjoy a wine that's from Eretz Yisrael, from the Holy Land, is so important.
All right, well, we got to
to
get to that category. When you said rosé, are you referring to this one?
Yeah.
All right, so Jeff, tell us about the Israel import and what stage we're at with that whole thing.
So we are in our 7th harvest in Israel.
Wow.
People don't realize we've been making wine there that long.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Well, if you didn't know it,
I
if
should
Jay
know.
didn't know it,
I mean,
I don't feel bad.
I didn't think about it.
That's because at our age, everything's going by fast. And so this last 7 years
There have been how many
100%.
seasons of bottled wines under your label from Israel?
seasons. Well,
Is this the 5th Rosh Hashanah where we have these wines?
So we had our 13 was the first in bottle, 13, 14, 15, 16, well, 15 for some, but
Yeah.
13, 14, 15, 16, 17. The 18, that's 6 years of wines out there because we're right now, this is a 2018 Rosé,
Right.
the 2018 Viognier, which is here in America, and currently we have the 2016 Red Blue Sea, but that's almost gone, so we're going to the 17 very soon. And then we have our 2016 Covenant Israel Syrah.
Yeah, amazing wine.
So, I first went to Israel in 2011 just to look around and quickly realized that not only is this our country and where I felt I belonged, but also it was an amazing place for winemaking. I mean, obviously they knew that 2,500 years ago, 3,500 years ago, but I got there a little late.
They did all the research for you, huh?
And it looked a lot to me
groundwork,
like,
as they say.
It looked like southern France, the Rhone Valley. It looked like parts of Napa Valley, and I thought, let's try to make some wine here too. And I think the wine's coming out of Israel, not just by Covenant, but by everybody who I know. And in fact, people can come and taste a lot of Israeli wine tomorrow at a very special event that we're going to talk about soon, right, Jay?
Is that open to the public or not, tomorrow's
Yes.
event? It is?
Yeah.
Open to the public?
So
Yeah,
Jay's thinking about it now. It might be open to
He's
the
only
public.
going to the trade part, but I'll tell you, at 6:30, it's open to the public for
very
2 or 3
good.
hours. Yeah. So the wines I think are really showing well. They inspired me to start making wine, not only looking at the red soils and the limestone outcrops that reminded me of great winemaking regions around the world, but the wines taste good, really good. So I'm very excited about what we're doing in Israel. I think Israel, listen, there's great kosher wine made in France and in
Right.
Italy and in California and in many parts of the world, but I feel that Israeli wine is our wine country.
Mm-hmm.
This is Jewish wine country.
Where is the quote-unquote winery in Israel? Is it in more than one location?
So, as many of you know, we have a winery in California.
Right.
It's in it's actually an urban winery in Berkeley, California, about an hour south of Napa. In Israel, I haven't yet built my own winery. That's the goal. And so right now I'm up in the Galilee, working under the good graces of a Deer winery, where I use their tanks. I use my crew, but I use their tanks and their equipment. And someday, hopefully, we'll have our own winery, Bezrat Hashem, and that's kind of my goal.
Jay, has this ever happened before?
What's that?
In your time in the world of kosher wine, where you saw an American winemaker turn their attention to the Holy Land? I can't think.
Well,
of
actually, yeah, the first and most exciting, I think, winemaker that turned his attention towards is Peter Stern, the founder of winemaking founder, I should say, of Herzog Wine Cellars. He actually started making wines in the Golan Heights as soon as they started growing the grapes. As soon as the grapes there were ready for making wine. The story goes that somebody from UC Davis, I can't remember his name, a very well-known professor at UC Davis, was asked to come and look at the Golan Heights to see what kind of fruits they should grow. Yeah. And he said, fruits? Citrus? No. What you need to grow up here are wine grapes. And then shortly thereafter, the Golan Heights winery was born. They called on Peter Stern to be the first winemaker of the Golan Heights winery, a fellow from California who had years of experience already making California wines there. And that was the first one. And now
this is around when? The story you're telling us?
1982, 83, 84, something like that.
Interesting.
Yeah. And then I know Peter, and I actually worked with Peter first 5 years of Covenant we made down at Herzog Wine Cellars in Southern California. And Peter was still affiliated with the Herzog family and Royal Wines, and we worked together, and Peter's a great guy in the Beshert department. Peter grew up in St. Helena, Napa Valley, which is like 3 blocks from where I lived for 15 years, but he had left by the time I got there. So it's just a very small world. There's also Victor Schoenfeld. He's an American who's an American-Israeli who lives in Israel, and my on-site winemaker, Ari Earl in Israel, he was born in Sacramento. He's been in Israel mostly for the last 30 years. He makes wines with us. He also makes wines with Jezreel Winery and another winery called Bat Shlomo. So there are a number of us who have gone back and have made what I call the wine aliyah. I think I'm the only one who owns a California winery, and it now owns. We have an Israeli business that will hopefully soon be an Israeli winery as well.
What's also interesting is you have people who've gone the other way. You have Shiki Rauschberger from Tepperberg, who is solid Israeli, born in Israel, et cetera, but went to UC Davis, California, to study winemaking there. You have Yisrael Flam of the Flam Winery, who was the chief winemaker in Carmel for many, many years, but studied winemaking in UC Davis in California. So you have it going both ways, and I think it's very exciting.
So did Eran Pick, who's with Tzora Winery. Eran worked and studied at Davis and lived in California. But fortunately, most of these guys have gone back to Israel, where I think we belong. There's Mayan Koshitsky.
What a Zionist!
I know, this guy's
oh my
amazing.
gosh!
I love
it. I'm embarrassed.
Mayan Koshitsky is a great winemaker from Israel. He's kind of in Israel now, in California, Napa Valley, making a big name for himself. But I think he'll go back to Israel too, because I saw him recently. He already misses Israel.
Jeff Morgan's here. If you were writing for Wine Spectator today, right?
Yeah.
Asked to do a pre-5780 article, what do you think the theme would be? What's happening that's interesting to you in the world of kosher wine that would be unique to this year? Anything catch your fancy?
Well,
strike your fancy?
In the wine business, things happen a little more slowly than in a year. But I would say that we are strongly and solidly heading into what I've been calling the kosher wine renaissance, that I think started sometime around about 25 years ago when Herzog started making wines in California, and Peter Stern was at the helm then, and I was just starting to review kosher wines, and I can tell you there weren't a lot of really good ones, but there were some excellent wines. And now this year, you walk into a wine shop and you look at the kosher section, or you go into a kosher wine shop and it's all the kosher section.
Right.
And I don't think you're going to find a whole lot of bad wines. You're going to find good, really good, and phenomenally good.
First great kosher wine that you reviewed was? The first great one that you reviewed in 19...
It was a Herzog Cabernet from Sonoma, from Chalk Hill. And
Do you remember that one, Jay?
Sure.
Yeah.
I still have a few bottles.
Was that a good one? That was a good one?
I think we gave that 93 points. And I remember, actually, my colleague Jim Lobby had the first taste. It was blind. We didn't know it was kosher. We didn't know what it was. And he sent the glass over to my side of the tasting table because I was on a different flight. And he goes, "What do you think of this?" And I said, "Wow, this is really good. I wonder what it is." And we took the bag off, and we saw it was Herzog wine. So I think that was the first moment I really realized, gee, we can make like phenomenal wines here in California, kosher. Let's try it.
That 93 sounds familiar. I think 20 years ago we made a big deal about that. if I'm
Yeah,
not
we
mistaken.
did, and
Yeah.
and I think that wine is also Mavushal.
Wow.
Well, we argue about that.
Which
Jay
year?
and I argue about that regularly.
Which year was it? Do you remember which
It
year?
was, I think we did that review in 97 or 8, so it must have been like in 96,
So
right?
the 96 was Mavushal, the 97 wasn't.
Yeah, I think it was 96. I think it was
but
Mavushal.
You know,
it's
listen, there's some
Simon,
good
that was impressive. That
Yeah.
was impressive.
Listen, if you can, I still think if you can avoid Mavushal, great, because it's just one more step. But there's plenty of really good Mavushal wines out there. I'm proud to say that right now, Covenant California is making a few of them also.
Right.
Yeah.
The Covenant Israel Blue Sea Rosé, which is a 2018, the one that sits in front of me,
Yeah.
that everybody in this room has highly recommended.
Yes.
This is now available here in all the retail stores.
No.
How does one obtain it?
You have to
No,
go
it's
to
not.
Israel.
That's
Right,
it.
It's not available.
Yeah.
Will it ever be available here?
Yeah, basically we make about the same amount of rosé in Israel as we make here in California, and I'm trying not to, create confusion with
Right.
two of the same wines from two different places.
With the name Covenant.
With the
on
name
it.
Covenant. One's a blue sea, one's a red sea, but people just see the sea and then they get confused which one's red and which one's blue. That was a brilliant marketing error on my part. And,
I love the backstory with Jeff.
what can I say? But so I'm not planning on bringing much of this rosé to America, but I am completely out of Red Sea rosé at this time, and I don't know how much rosé is still in the Royals cellar here on the East Coast. So we're going to take a look at that. I'm going to bring probably a small amount to California, maybe a pallet, 56 cases, and that'll be all that comes to America. I don't know if Royal is going to take any of that or not. We'll see.
So when you're in Israel, you got to have this wine. I mean,
Absolutely. You can get this wine in like lots of wine shops and lots of restaurants. And it in Israel, in America, we make 15 wines, but in Israel, we only make 4. We make the rosé, the Blue Sea rosé. We make the Blue Sea Adom, the red blend, which is a Syrah Cabernet blend. And then we make the Viognier, which is our Israeli white wine, which we're pouring tomorrow. And we really need to talk about this big tasting tomorrow. And then, of course, our Syrah. Jay and his colleagues have convinced me that we need to make an Israeli Cabernet. I've been fighting this battle because I think Rhone varietals such as Syrah and Viognier are the best in Israel. That doesn't mean there's not really good Cabernet coming out of Israel. In fact, I got some. I've been blending it away into my Adom, but I think I got some really good Cabernet. So, Jay, we're going to come out with a small amount of Israeli Cabernet.
We don't disagree on the fact that Israel makes the best wines out of Mediterranean varietals. I don't disagree with that at all. What our focus is that we also know that they make great Cabernets out of Israel, and that, for better or for worse, is what a lot of the public wants. So
Right, and
it's a marketing.
I've made wine because I want to make particular wines from particular places, and again, it's my flagship wine from California is Cabernet, so I don't particularly want to have a flagship Cabernet from Israel. So we'll just have a small amount.
Just so you
Simon?
know, this year particularly, there were a lot of rosés that were made, and to be honest, I really didn't enjoy most of them, but this one in particular is by far and away, I think, the best rosé made in either place.
and it's available in those nice Jerusalem wine shops, right, Simon?
It's
Is it one of,
available anywhere.
Isn't one of my cousins now with that new Jerusalem wine shop? I think. Didn't I hear that?
I don't know.
I think so.
I don't know.
I think,
But I'm just telling you, I love this.
I can tell
this
you
is
where-
my favorite, absolutely favorite rosé.
In Jerusalem, the restaurant that's selling more Covenant Israel Blue Sea Rosé more than any other restaurant is Crave, which is near Machne Yehuda Market, and it is blowing through this
That's
stuff.
because Simon's there every other night, so it's selling like
So
crazy.
we were also in a restaurant in that hotel where they only have Israeli wines, with one exception, and that's yours. Come on, what's
in Tel Aviv.
That's right, in Tel Aviv.
That's starts with an S. It's right on the water there in Tel Aviv.
You're talking about the restaurant or the
restaurant? The restaurant. It's in a hotel.
Herbert Samuel's?
Samuel.
Not the Herbert Samuel. You're talking about
that's
the Ritz Carlton.
No, the Ritz Carlton has our wines too, but no, he's talking about the Sitan, or what does it say?
I don't know.
Satay? I don't know.
That's it.
Satay.
Satay. Thank you.
Satay.
We're going to get there. Between four of us, we can get there. The Satay. It surprised me. I don't know why my California wines are there. I'd like to see my Israeli
And it's so
wines
interesting. That just shows you what kind of
The wine in Israel, the wine consumption in Israel as well, has really gone.
Yeah, and there's an election coming up, so trust me, they'll be drinking a lot the next week. That's for sure.
They better.
Jeff Morgan is here. Jay Buchsbaum, Simon Jacob. Jeff or Jay, what can you tell us about tomorrow night? Who has details about what's going on tomorrow evening?
I do.
What do you got, Jeff?
I'm ready.
Go ahead, Jeff.
So we are having, for the first time ever, the first Wines of Israel grand tasting with a consortium of some 27 wineries, I think, from Israel, including Covenant Israel. We've all come here to New York to show the world just how good Israeli wine can be. And there is an event tomorrow. It's at the Union Park Tasting Arena at 5-7 East 17th Street. The trade actually has a tasting from 12 to 4 with some seminars, and the public is welcome at 6:30. You should go to Wines of Israel Grand Tasting, or winesofisrael.com, for details about how to get a ticket.
Just a note of caution.
Sure.
I believe, if I'm not incorrect about this, there may be some of the wines there that are not certified kosher. There may be some of the wines that are not certified kosher.
As
so
you
just
pointed out to
a
us,
note
that
of caution.
not every wine in Israel is kosher.
Right.
But mine are.
Oh, I like to say
we
not
know.
certified kosher.
Right,
yeah.
not certified
Yeah.
kosher would be more accurate. Winesofisrael.com. I'm on the site right now, winesofisrael.com. And again, the event is tomorrow night. It's happening at 5-7 East 17th Street, 12 to 4 for the trade, 6:30 for the public. Check out winesofisrael.com. And there's one other piece that I wanted to mention that we discovered. And that is that, of course, Jeff and Jody have...
That's my wife.
That's your wife. Have done such an amazing job with Covenant. And we do get a chance to see Jody once in a while, especially at the big shows. But you've added a gentleman named Jeff Rochwarger.
You are the first person who has ever pronounced his name correctly. Congratulations.
Thank you very
Nachum.
much.
Yes.
What can you tell us about Jeff Rochwarger?
Okay, so Jeff Rochwarger is our new partner. As many of you know, I founded Covenant with the late Leslie Rudd. He died about a year and a half ago. And with an extensive search, we finally found Jeff. Just to confuse people, he's Geoff, though I'm Jeff. And Jeff is a longtime fan of Covenants and a friend of ours. He lives in Israel, where he made Aliyah 14 years ago. And he stepped in to help us with our finances, of course, and also to basically solidify our program in Israel, the Covenant Israel Project. Jeff has the same vision I do. He wants to build a winery in Israel, and so we're working on that together. And he was already in the liquids business. He drills for water, actually, in the Golan Heights and also near the Dead Sea. So that's what he does. That's his day job. And
That's interesting.
yes, it's a very interesting job that he has. And we're just delighted to have Jeff part of the Covenant family. He's got a great business head, which is something I don't have necessarily. And so it's great to have him collaborate with us.
All right, Jeff Rochwarger, welcome aboard. Covenant and Covenant Israel will certainly benefit. Jeff Morgan, Covenant and Covenant Israel, we wish you continued success.
Thank you, Nachum. we're striving for that, and with your help and the help of people who love wine everywhere, I think we're going to make it.
We admire those who make sure to keep their attention on the Holy Land, those who help us bridge the gap between the diaspora and our true homeland, the State of Israel. And you are obviously a key component in a very important industry. For that alone, we salute you, in addition to the delicious wine that you're making.
Thank you. Let's remember to salute my daughter Zoe, also. Zoe Morgan, who made Aliyah 5 years ago.
Right, I remember this story.
And who works with Covenant Israel and is in charge of our marketing, sales, and hospitality program over there. She's also now married to a nice Israeli boy. So we're...
Where are they living, in what city?
They live in Tel Aviv.
Very nice.
Yes.
Well, excellent, and continued success, and a Shana Tova to you.